Today we're looking at Psalm number 9. It's a bit uncomfortable in some ways. It raises a number of challenges for us. David, who is the author of this psalm, is a man of war. We have all sorts of other images of David. He's the man who writes, "The Lord is my shepherd," and he's a shepherd boy, and he's a brave lad who kills the wicked Goliath. But he was a man of war, a man of blood. He conquered the last bits of the promised land, in particular the city of Jebus, which became Jerusalem. He was a man of battle. That was the reason God told him that even though his longing was to build a house for the Lord, a temple in Jerusalem, it would be built by Solomon, his son, a man of peace. God wasn't going to have his temple built by a man of war, even though he loved David and David loved him. And a lot of David's imagery and his thinking and his experience is of warfare and nations battling. And at his point in time, Israel surrounded by danger and embattled and attacked. And he, as king, having to fight to maintain his kingship, even though that came from God, to fight civil wars and wars against external enemies successfully, but a man of war, not like his son, a man of peace. And that comes out very much in this psalm. We have to accept the context, and that's what's going on. That's the background to David's very godly thinking in this psalm. It also raises the fascinating question frequently asked about whether preachers and teachers of the Bible, clergy and bishops and others should be involved in politics or should talk about politics. Well, this psalm does. It doesn't take one side or another in politics, but it absolutely says that God is the Lord of nations and of battles and all that. And we have to understand that. And we today need to be brave to proclaim that as well. Uncomfortable as it will be, and sometimes risky as it be, it's easy to get this wrong. It's easy to go too far one way or another when we're looking at these issues. But here's David in verse 1 of Psalm 9. "I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. I'll tell of all your wonderful deeds. I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High." That could be any of the Psalms, couldn't it, almost? You're a great God. You've done great things. I'm going to tell of your deeds. I'm going to thank you with my whole heart. I'm going to praise you, O Most High. Most High, of course, does carry just a little flavor of militarism, and it's meant to, because it goes straight into verse 3. "When my enemies turned back, they stumbled and perished before you. For you've maintained my just cause. You've sat on your throne, giving righteous judgment." He's talking about battle, and he's saying, I've won some battles, but actually, Lord, you won them. My enemies stumbled and perished before you. My enemies turned back in my battles, but you defeated them. That's how David understands this. It's not that God is watching, regretting that battle and fighting is going on. It's that God is fighting on David's side. That's how David sees it. Now, we can spiritualize that, and we can say, truly, God is with us fighting against temptation. God is with us fighting against injustice. God is with us fighting against poverty. God is with us fighting against racism or discrimination or whatever. Yes, it's all true. But here is David saying God is with him fighting and winning his military battles for him. And God is on his throne giving righteous judgment. That is, God is deciding the outcome of military battles, taking sides. "You have rebuked the nations, you've destroyed the wicked, you've blotted out their name forever and ever. The enemies have vanished in everlasting ruins. Their cities you have rooted out, the very memory of them has perished." He's talking about the former occupants of the land, what we sometimes call the Holy Land. He's talking about those who practiced false and evil religion, including child sacrifices and temple prostitution and all the rest of it. And he's saying God rooted them out, God destroyed them, God brought their cities to ruin. He's seeing God as using military force to overcome evil. But the Lord sits enthroned forever, verse 7. He's established his throne for judgment. He judges the world with righteousness. He judges the peoples with equity. David knows that God gets involved in human affairs, but he is certain that God is just and right. And that's what we need to hold on to. Unless we want to say God never gets involved in human affairs and he doesn't like the idea of war or conflict and he turns a blind eye to all of it, if we will dare to say with David, God gets involved, then we say, but God is just and God is right. We don't always understand that. God doesn't think the way we do. We don't think the way God does always. And we can't cast God in our image and judge God by our standards. We just accept that God does and thinks what is right. It's a challenge. It's a challenge because we can think so differently in different ways. Historically, we can be much more militaristic than God would want us to be. Sometimes we can be too passive in the face of wickedness. This is really difficult stuff. Verse 11, sing praises to the Lord who dwells in Zion, declare his deeds among the peoples. Yes, that's easy, isn't it? Verse 12, for he who avenges blood is mindful of them. He does not forget the cry of the afflicted. That is, God who does battle is doing it for the sake of the poor and the innocent and the oppressed. 13, be gracious to me, O God, see what I suffer from those who hate me. He continues along the same vein that those who've done evil, and that includes nations that have done evil, have been judged or will be judged by God. And God is over politics, and God is over nationalism, and God is over militarism. God is Lord of all. He is Lord of hosts. That means Lord of mighty armies. David is a military commander. He's speaking and thinking in that way. And so he's describing God in that way. We may describe God in our ways, in ways that are more appropriate to what we're doing and thinking. God who is for the weak or the oppressed or the persecuted or the hungry or the homeless. And that's entirely appropriate too. But God is God. And what we mustn't do is cast God into our own image. So verse 17, the wicked shall depart to Sheol, all the nations that forget God. But the needy shall not always be forgotten, nor the hope of the poor perish forever. Rise up, O Lord. Do not let mortals prevail. Let the nations be judged before you. Put them in fear, O Lord. Let the nations know that they are only human. This psalm is about the fact that God is God and that people are people and the nations are human. And we may think the nations are big and the nations control the world. We may think that the superpowers and the economic forces control the world. But this psalm tells us that God is in charge and the nations are only human and we're only human. So the best thing we can do is bow down before him and sing his praises and acknowledge that he is God and that he is just and he is right. Amen.